Hi, Josh Dimley, CEO of MWI, coming to you from Shenzhen, China. Let's talk about how do you get PR when your business is boring. So, my latest article just came out in Entrepreneur Magazine. It's called Your Business Can Be Boring, but Your Marketing Can't. That wasn't the original title I gave it, but the point was to talk to companies that think that their business is boring and talk about how they can create stories for their businesses that are interesting, that people will gravitate towards. So, one of the companies that I featured in this article is called Lucidchart, and they do flowchart software. And that sounds kind of boring. I mean, that's about as exciting as PowerPoint. But even PowerPoint, now there's a website out there called SlideShare. SlideShare is the YouTube of PowerPoint. Now, I don't know about you, but the thing I want to be doing on a Friday night is probably not looking through PowerPoint presentations. But SlideShare gets tens of millions of views every month. It's a really popular website. It's great for SEO. It's a great way to do marketing, to do PowerPoint presentations, keynote presentations, and stick them up there on SlideShare. So that's one boring business right there that has made things interesting. Lucidchart has made flowcharts interesting. And one of the ways that they did this is they tied their software to things that are popular in pop culture. So they made flowcharts around Star Wars and fantasy football and Dungeons and Dragons and things that people were interested in. And they showed how a flowchart could clarify things about these topics and explain things related to these topics. And that's how they made their product interesting. One of the other businesses that we work with a lot at MWI is we work with self-storage companies. Now, if there's any boring business, it's self-storage. Self-storage is a building that's shaped like a box, and you've got rooms shaped like boxes in that building, and then people come and they put boxes in those boxes, and then they leave them there for a year or two. That's the whole business. It's not really interesting. It makes a lot of money. That's great. That's interesting. But it's not a fascinating business model. It's not a fascinating business to be part of. Unless you dig into those details and you're just into that business. It's kind of like real estate in a way, but the boring kind of real estate, not the fancy architecture type real estate. So it's just a business that cash flows well, but it's boring, right? Not exactly. So Storage Wars is one of the most successful cable TV shows of all time. And what's Storage Wars? It's a TV show about self-storage. But what they did is they said, well, self-storage is boring, but sometimes people open these self-storage facilities or these a self-storage unit, and they'll open a unit, and sometimes they find interesting stuff in there. Now, Storage Wars, the way it works is that if you put your stuff in a self-storage facility and then you don't pay your bill for a certain amount of time, then by law, the self-storage facility can confiscate your stuff and sell it at an auction in order to recoup the cost of what you haven't paid them for storing their stuff. So this is where things get interesting, is that sometimes people don't pay their bill, and it might be that they died, it might be that they got sick, it might be that they forgot, but for whatever reason, the self-storage facility has contacted the unit owner several times, tried to get in touch with them, hasn't been able to get in touch with them, can't collect any money from them. And so they open the unit up and they auction it off. But with these auctions, they don't let people go in and buy stuff piecemeal. That's too much trouble. So everybody stands outside. They can't enter the storage unit. They have to look from the outside, and then they bid, and they just, they're looking in this unit and they see a bunch of boxes. They don't know what's in those boxes. And that's where the excitement of this show comes from, is that people buy the unit and they might pay a couple $100, they might pay a couple $1,000 if a bunch of people bid it up because they think there's something exciting in those boxes. And then on the TV show, they open up these boxes or they look into the self-storage unit and they see, oh wow, there are these collectible baseball cards, or there's a bunch of money packed in these boxes. It's fascinating, the stuff that people find in these self-storage units, and that's why this TV show Storage Wars has become so popular. So your business, you might be thinking, oh, but my business, it's just boring. It's so boring. There's nothing exciting about it. But there might be an angle to your business that makes it interesting. Like you can make self-storage interesting, or like you can make flowcharts interesting. So here's some tips on how to find that PR angle, that marketing angle that might make your business interesting and give you some ideas about promoting it. So first of all, you want to think bigger than your product or your service. So when you think about your business, you might be focused on your product and you say, well, my product's not that interesting. But can you tie your product to something that is more interesting? So the same way that Lucidchart, they tied their business to Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy football and Star Wars and things like that, can you tie your business to pop culture somehow and make it interesting in that way? Another way is to get in touch with the grassroots. So Lucidchart, they went on Reddit. Now Reddit, if you're not familiar with it, it's kind of like a big message board. There are lots of topics and people are discussing topics and people are discussing everything on Reddit, and it gets a lot of traffic. So you can go to Reddit and you can see what topics are being discussed. There might already be people on there discussing topics related to your business. You can look at Reddit and you can find out what people are discussing. That gives you some clues as to what they find interesting about your industry or about your business. Another website where you can do this is Quora. That's Quora.com. Quora is a question and answer website. So people ask questions, other people, experts, they come and they answer those questions. You can go in Quora and you can find out what questions people are asking about your product, your service, your industry, and you can answer those questions. And that can become fodder for PR, for creating stories. So if you see a lot of questions centered on a certain theme on Quora, you can say, hey, this is getting some interest. Maybe we should create a blog post around this. Maybe we should reach out to a journalist and talk about crafting a story that answers these questions because it looks like a lot of people are asking these questions. So I did this myself with MWI a few years ago. We sell SEO services, and maybe SEO is interesting to you. To a lot of people, it's kind of boring. But to somebody who's buying SEO services, the topic of how to hire an SEO firm is really interesting. People want tips on that when they're about to plunk down a couple $1,000s a month. So I went out and I wrote an article for Forbes called 4 Tips on How to Hire an SEO Firm. And that generated a ton of leads for MWI. It wasn't an article about MWI. I was just giving tips out on how to hire an SEO firm. And people found this article and they said, hey, I'm looking to hire an SEO firm. This article answers my questions. And then they would say, well, who wrote this article? And they would do their research and they'd find MWI and then they'd come and they'd hire us because we wrote this article. I wrote this article in Forbes and they trusted it because of that credibility in Forbes. So you can create these same type of stories about your business. For your customers, it's a very interesting topic, the idea or the question of how do I buy your services or how do I buy your products? What tips can I look for? How can I save money? How can I make sure I'm getting high quality? You can answer all these questions about your business. You might not think these are very interesting questions to answer, but your customers find these questions very interesting because if you can save them a couple $100s, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, if you can save them a lot of hassle, a lot of time, you're solving big problems for them, and that's very interesting to your customers. So that's another place that you can start. So remember, your business might be boring, but if you have a business, then it's not boring to somebody. Somebody is buying your products and services. Your business is not boring to those people. So go and ask them. Go talk to them. Remember, these are the people who are buying the stuff from you. These are the people you want to connect with. So go and talk to them. You might even do a video interview of them. You might interview a bunch of them and write it up in a blog post. Ask them questions about how they're using your product and service, why they care about it, what they looked for when they were buying it, and why they chose you. There are all sorts of ways that you can make your business interesting, even if you think you've got a boring business. And you can turn these answers into blog posts, video, and PR attention, because you can approach journalists with these answers and say, hey, I think I've got an interesting story about my industry. Here are some quotes from people. Here are some details that people have given me. And that's candy for a journalist or for a writer. So I hope these tips help. If you have any questions, please comment in the YouTube comments below, and I'd love to answer your questions.